everyone. My name is Kavita and I'm from IDP IELTS in Australia. I'm so excited to welcome you to the first webinar of our IELTS from Start to Finish series. We have test takers joining us from all over the world today. So wherever you are, welcome. Thank you for connecting and thank you for choosing IELTS. Our presenter tonight will be the one and only IELTS expert, Dawn Oliver. I think by this point, most of you know Don from our previous webinars, masterclasses, and his appearance on our TikTok channel. He has more than 30 years experience working with IELTS, so you're in very good hands. In tonight's webinar, an introduction to IELTS, Don will take you through the basics of IELTS, aiming to teach you everything you need to know about the test. He will be joined by a special guest, Oki, from our IDP IELTS Test Center in Melbourne, who will share a walkthrough of the test center so you know exactly what to expect on test day. She will also share some very handy computer-delivered IELTS tips. We will end the webinar with a short Q&A session, so if you're joining via Zoom, please submit your questions in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us via Facebook, please leave our comments you have for Dawn in the comments box, and we will try to answer as many as we can today. So without further ado, Dawn, take it away.
Thank you very much, Kavita, and it's great to be with you all today. And as Kavita said, we're going to talk about IELTS from start to finish. There's not a lot of time, so I really can't go into every single detail, but I hope to give you a good understanding of the basics. So where do we begin? Well, the first thing that I want to explain to you is what is IELTS. I want to explain that, and I want to explain some of the tools that we provide you that can help you prepare for that test. And as Kavita said, at the end of this presentation, you're going to have a very special tour of the test center in Melbourne, which is a very important part of the IELTS network. Well, what is IELTS? The first word in IELTS is international. That's an important word because the test is produced by Cambridge University in the UK, yes, but the people who write the questions are in Australia and in the United States. The people who test you will be from all parts of the world. It's an international English language test, and it's recognized internationally as well. And that is important because if you get an IELTS score, you know that anyone, anywhere will understand what that means. It's a test of your English level, your proficiency. It's not really a test of how much knowledge you have of other things. It's a language test. And that's one of the reasons why it is such a popular test. It's the most popular English language test for study, for work, and also for migration. It's accepted everywhere, and 10,000 educational institutions and other organizations around the world will recognize your results. So when we prepare for an IELTS test, you need to know a few things. And the first thing you need to really understand is what score you need and which IELTS test you want to do, because there are two different types of tests. There's an academic test for entry to university. There is a general training test, which is sometimes used for employment. Either test is okay for migration purposes. Find out what score you need and work towards that score. Do some test preparation, do some practice tests for sure. Learn the format of the test. But to really prepare for the test, the one thing you must do is improve your English. So you can do that every day, anywhere. Then you're ready to book your test date. And you can do that very easily online in many different places. So I mentioned before that there are two types of IELTS test. The academic test, as I said, is for universities. Also, if you are an overseas trained doctor or nurse or accountant and you want to practice in an English speaking country, you will need an academic IELTS score. If you want to migrate to one of those countries, you will be asked for a score, but it can be academic or general training. And the general training is a different sort of test. The reading is different and the writing is a little bit different. Okay. Apart from the two different types of IELTS test, academic and general training, there are two different ways of doing the test. And the first one, and it's becoming more and more popular, is the computer delivered IELTS test. And later on, when you do a tour of the Melbourne Centre here in Australia, you will see the computer room where you can do the computer delivered test. The paper-based test, many of you will have done with a pencil and paper. That still exists and it's still popular with people. The listening, the reading, the writing are all in fact the same in both tests, except that you have your own headphones in the computer test. You're able to put your answers on a screen, and that suits some people. The speaking test remains the same for both the computer and the paper test. So anytime you do a speaking test for IELTS, it will be in a small room with one other person only, and they can listen to you. You can ask for repetition. They will explain some words to you. So that is an important part of IELTS. The big difference between the IELTS on a computer and the IELTS on paper is that you get your result more quickly with the IELTS computer delivered test. And there is less time taken up with handing out papers and collecting papers, and you do the test with a smaller group of people. So in many ways, it's more efficient. Okay, let's go on and look at the format of the test. Now, IELTS is a big test. It takes nearly 3 hours to do. And that is why it is recognized all around the world. It's a good test of your real level of English. The listening is the first part in most parts of the world, but if you're doing the test in Australia, the writing will be the first part in the pencil and paper test. It doesn't matter in what order these come, they are always the same. Listening takes about 30 minutes with 40 questions. The reading takes 60 minutes with 40 questions. The writing takes 60 minutes with 2 tasks. And the speaking will take about 14 minutes in most cases. And there are 3 parts to that speaking. As I said before, the academic and the general training are very similar, except for the reading and the writing. Okay. If you can understand me, you are not any of these people. A 0 person who gets a 0 in the test did not go to the test. A 1 is someone who does not have any English. A 2, just a little bit of English. A 3, a little bit more. A 4, only very basic English. You are probably here, around about a band 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9. I hope I'm a 9 because it's my first language. But if you are a 9, you don't have to be a native speaker. You can get a 9 even though your first language is a different language. We have assessment criteria for speaking and writing on our website, IELTS.com, and you can have a look in more detail at what a band 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 can do in those parts of the test. Let's look now at writing in a little bit more detail. Writing in the academic type of test is basically task 1, describing something. In task 1, you have 20 minutes to describe in words some information that is visual. It could be a graph, or like this, it could be a diagram that shows how something is done. All you have to do is describe what you see. You don't have to explain, you don't have to give an opinion. That's in task 2 of the writing. So task 2 of the writing is like this. You're given a statement. Here the statement says university graduates can earn more than less well-educated people, so they should pay for their studies. Then you are asked to respond to the statement. And here the response is simple. Do you agree? Now you can answer this question quite easily. You can say, yes, I agree for these reasons. And that is a good answer. But sometimes the task 2 task is a bit more complicated. Sometimes you might be asked to discuss the reasons for something and solutions for something. So look very closely at what you are being asked to do in task 2 writing. In the general training writing, as I said, it's a little bit different. Task 1 in general training is about writing a letter. You have 2 tasks, but the first task is writing a letter. Now, in both the academic and the general training, you should be careful to spend only 20 minutes on task 1 and 40 minutes on task 2. Why? Because task 1 is only 1/3 of the mark. Task 2 is 2/3 of the mark. It's twice as important. Here you can see you have to write a letter in general training task 1 of 150 words. The situation is explained to you and you are given 3 or 4 points to cover in your letter. In task 2, it's very similar to an academic task 2 because you have to write an opinion. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's a British test. But as I said before, it's an international test. And this means that you can use American spellings. You can use British spellings. Where I come from, Australia, many Australians use a mixture of American and British spelling. So it's fine. Okay, there is an example of a general training task 1. And as I said, you are given a situation. Here, the situation is there are plans to build apartments in a park near where you live. And you are told who to write to. Here, you are told to write to the editor of the newspaper. And then you are told to cover 3 points. How did you find out about the plan? What do you think of the park? Do you like it? And then, what do you think of the plans? Do you like the plan? You don't have, there's no correct answer. You can say, yes, the park is terrible. Let's build apartments there. The plans are good. Or you can say, we love the park. We can't have apartments there. The plans are terrible. Both answers are perfectly good, but just make sure that you answer those 3 points. And very importantly, spend a couple of minutes understanding the task, because sometimes people misunderstand the task and their whole letter is off the point. The same applies for task 2. Spend a couple of minutes understanding the task, because if you don't, you can't get a good score. All right. Remember I said that academic task 2 and general training task 2 are very similar. Well, here is an example of a general training task 2, and you'll see the format is the same for task 2 in academic. You are given a statement. Here, the statement is, in many countries, people are eating more and more unhealthy food, and they are taking less exercise. Statement. Then response. What are the causes of this? And what can be done about it? Now, this is not an academic question. This is a question about everyday life and lifestyle. And that is the difference between a general training and an academic task. Here, the response is quite complicated. You have to give reasons for people eating unhealthy food and reasons for people taking less exercise. You've got to give a solution to the first problem and a solution to the next problem. You've really got to do 4 things in this task. Again, read carefully and answer directly. All right, that's writing. Let's look at the reading part now. As I said before, the reading in academic is a little bit different to the reading in general training, but they both take 60 minutes. They both have 40 questions. There are 3 sections in both, but in the general training, the passages are shorter. Instead of having one passage of about 900 words in part 1, they might have 2 passages of about 400 words each. And those passages will be a list or a group of advertisements in general training, because the reading there is about your everyday life. 40 questions in 60 minutes in academic, 40 questions and 60 minutes in general training. Okay. The thing about reading is we have to test first if you can understand what you read, and second, how efficiently you can read. If we gave you 4 hours to do a reading test, well, we could assess whether you understood, but could you read efficiently? So we give you less time. We ask you to read about 2,500 words in 1 hour. That means you must become efficient with your reading. You need to practice some important skills. The first important skill you need to practice is skimming. Skimming is what you do already when you read something in your first language. If you're reading something in Spanish or Hindi or Arabic or Indonesian, in the newspaper, you don't read every word. You are looking for something that is interesting. That is skimming. You are looking for the general meaning. And if you find something interesting, then you will read for detail. Scanning is similar. You are not reading every word, but you are looking for a particular thing. For example, do you ever turn to the back page of the newspaper to find a football score? That is scanning. You are looking for the name of your team and a number. You want to know how many goals they score. That is scanning. Now you can do this in IELTS. Read the question first, find out what the key word is, and then find that key word in the passage, and that will make your reading more efficient and quicker. And that is how you will succeed in the reading test for IELTS. Okay, there are different question types in IELTS, and this is one of the reasons why it is a good test. The reason I say it's a good test because it has different question types is because the more different types of questions, the less able you are to simply guess.